What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I am your host, Justin Michael. We're officially in off-season mode. I'm done with the Avalanche coverage for the time being. We're done with spring football. It's speculation season, as I like to call it. It's going to be a lot of projection and hypotheticals and all kinds of stuff. You guys are used to it. You know the drill if you're a year-round sports fan. But we'll try and have some fun these next couple of months. We'll try and get some interesting guests on, get some differing perspectives, maybe touch on some subjects we don't typically dive into. It's going to be a pretty standard show today. We're going to get into the latest recruiting news, talk about a couple of portal additions for CSU football, how I could see those guys potentially factoring into the mix this year for the Rams. They've added an offensive and defensive commitment this week, so we'll get into that a little later on into the show. I am going to give out 10 questions that I have, fairly general, but just kind of the questions I have about CSU football as we go into the summer. Some of these are more big picture. Some of them are more specific in terms of like a position battle or something like that. But I figured we'd just kind of set the scene for the season that way. In the beginning here, just kind of, I guess, setting the scene for lack of a better term for the show as a whole. Coming off of this playoff experience covering the Avalanche, it's just made me really reflective on the sports fan experience and frankly how tough it is the vast majority of the time. It's mostly heartbreak, and this is a subject that I've talked about before, but you've got to be able to appreciate the moments. You've got to be able to enjoy the ride, and especially when your team does something that is maybe rare or is able to, reach a level that they hadn't previously been at, you've got to be able to appreciate those moments. Like CSU winning the Mountain West tournament this past year for the first time in a couple of decades was just such a special moment on so many levels. I mean, that team was such a blast. It was such an emotional roller coaster, but to see them reach the mountaintop after coming so close all those years, it was amazing. And obviously then when the season came to a dramatic end in the NCAA tournament, it was just gut-wrenching. And it was a very similar experience covering the Avalanche, just with how they went out in Game 7, obviously kind of a brutal collapse. I've had a rough run here in terms of covering big moments. CSU, I think on the hoop side, got it done this past year. Obviously would have been cool to see that run extended and see the Rams, reach the Sweet 16. But I think the CSU basketball season was definitely a success. And I think the football season as a whole was successful. But when you go out that way and you lose in a tough way to swallow for the fans, that's really what you're going to be left with in terms of the lasting image. And I always come back to that quote from Billy Beane in Moneyball. I don't know if Billy Beane said this in real life, but Brad Pitt playing him in the movie Moneyball, if you lose the last game of the season, nobody gives a shit. And I think that's kind of a good way to segue into these questions that we have about CSU football going into 2025, just because it's a huge year for the program. It's a pivotal season going into year 4 of a 5-year deal for Jay Norvell. I think there's significant implications for the future for both the program and for him this year. You're going to have to do more. The bar has been raised. I think he's done a tremendous job elevating the program, and I'm not even doing this to try and be dramatic or, I don't know, generate clicks with some, hot takes in the offseason or something like that. I just think that at this stage of his tenure, given that you have a 3rd-year starting quarterback and, you've kind of got the program back in a competitive state, it's going to be expected for you to continue this ascension. And the program took a lot of steps in the right direction this past year. They were in the championship race in November for the first time in at least 6 years. Like, you'd have to go back to 2017, really more like 2014 if you want to be realistic. They obviously beat two rivals in the same season for the first time in over a decade. They beat Air Force in the Springs for the first time since 2002. They got the bronze boot back. They took a lot of steps in the right direction, but going back to that quote, if you lose the last game, nobody gives a shit. When you go out the way that they did in the bowl game, and there were plenty of circumstances that played into that, I understand it. The portal situation, losing some key guys offensively, all of that factored into the matchup. Lack of health, you didn't have some guys healthy. Like, if you could have had Jalen Dupree, for instance, in that game, that maybe that's a difference offensively. But when you go out down bad, and then when you get your butts kicked by a middle of the road program from the MAC, like, it's going to leave kind of a sour taste in everybody's mouth. And it was a similar deal, with the Avalanche. Like, they did a lot of great things. They made all these awesome moves. They went all in, which I think objectively most people would be behind, but they still lost in 7 to the Stars. Their old superstar, came back to be the Grim Reaper, and it was rough. And now it's going to put a lot of pressure going into next season. I think there's a lot of pressure on CSU to succeed next season. Norvell, he's 49-47 all time as a head coach in 8 years, so a couple games above 500. But he's 5 games below 500 since coming to CSU. He's 16-21, although obviously, that record somewhat skewed from the first season, which was just a brutal spot. I really don't think there was a coach in the country that could have came in and had the Rams be competitive enough to, like, compete for a conference championship or even push for a bowl game in 2022. And especially when a lot of those guys ultimately decided to leave and portal in the first month of the season, that just made the situation that much worse. But they took another step in the right direction in 2023, but they came up short. They didn't reach a bowl. They did reach a bowl this past season, but they didn't win it. And frankly, they kind of got embarrassed on a national stage, and it was just this huge missed opportunity. It was this chance to capitalize on the successes of the season, to end on a high note, to validate all of those Ram fans making the effort to go out to Tucson and travel. It was such a cool experience seeing all of the CSU fans out in Arizona and invested and excited for the moment. And then it was just some Ram life, some typical CSU Ram shit. And they've got to find a way to get over that. Like, I feel like the basketball program has gotten over the hump, and obviously you want to maintain that in the post-Medved era. For football here, though, going into year 4, it's kind of a make it or break it year. I feel like for the program under Jay Norvell, 16-21 through 3 years. When you look back comparatively, he's kind of in between Fairchild and Bobo. Bobo was 21-18 through his first 3 years. McElwain 22-16. Another guy who had a rough first year, took a major step in the right direction in year 2, and then really exploded in year 3. That's what we had kind of hoped to see for CSU under Norvell this past season. In some ways it happened. I mean, they won 8 games, but obviously, and we had these debates throughout the fall, there were a lot of fair points from skeptics regarding the strength of schedule and some of that. I think some of that gets overblown just because nobody's going to make excuses for you when you're getting your butts kicked or when you're losing to good teams, but everybody sure loves to poke holes in the wins when, people are beating alleged, lesser than competition, or competition that is lesser than would be a better way to phrase it. But this is a big year, at this point. The fact that Jay Norvell hasn't already locked down an extension, to me, it feels like the season where they either validate that they're the staff to take this program to the next level, to usher them into the Pac-12 era, or it might be a situation where you start looking elsewhere as an institution. I don't think you would go into the Pac-12 with a lame duck scenario. I think I personally, and I this isn't me reporting it, this is all just my opinion reading the situation. I think he either breaks through and he locks down an extension and kind of secures his spot as the coach, moving forward. Or I think it's a coaching change. Like, I would have a hard time seeing the school go into 2026 with a coach in the last year of his deal. Maybe you could, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I really do feel like this one is pivotal. And again, like when you look at the numbers, historically, this is kind of when you know whether a program is going to be for real under a coach or not. Bobo 21-18, you kind of knew going into year 4. There was some small hope going into year 4 for him, just with Colin Hill, and then obviously he got hurt again, and that whole situation got screwed up. But Sonny was 23-12 through 3 years. They only played 11 games in 1993. Funny story, actually, a little side tangent. They only played 11 games his first year. He wanted to play 11 games in 94 his second year, and that was the intention going into the season. And then the school was like, you want to know what? We're going to play another game because we'd really like to make some money here. The game they added ended up being that trip to Arizona, which, as we all know, played out as one of the most significant, if not the most significant win in CSU football history. So just kind of funny how that all played out. But the real point of all of that is you should know, really halfway through year 3 or so, if this is legit or not. And it's going to be a really big year for the program in terms of either breaking through and reaching that next level, or seemingly staying in purgatory, as Ram Hill says here in the Toyota chat. I'd really like to stay out of new coach purgatory. What would be best for the program in the long run would be to maintain continuity. It would be to establish success under this current regime. That's the best case scenario for CSU. Jay Norvell works out. They're able to, make the Mountain West Championship, win some big games this year, maybe like a 9-10 win season, something like that. Like, that would be incredible. It would just generate so much excitement going into an era that's already going to be an exciting time for CSU. There's just a lot of unknown that comes with the staff change, especially in the portal era. It could put you in a position where you're rebuilding from scratch. And obviously that's not ideal at all. And that's the tough balance these days of wanting to have ambition, wanting to be aggressive. There are times you have to make a judgment call as an administrator and recognize that either this just isn't working, or maybe this has essentially reached the ceiling. Like, it's not going to get any better from there. And if that's the case, I don't think most fans would be content with this being the ceiling for the program. We've seen CSU achieve so much more in previous years. Obviously, I know college football has changed so much. There's a lot of factors working against Mountain West schools, working against mid-major schools, that make it really tough sledding in terms of establishing consistency and remaining competitive from a year-to-year basis. It's just hard to hold on to your players. Something like over 70% of the all-conference players from the G5 level this past year entered the portal. So it's tough, and there are some real factors that work against you. But if you're CSU and you're looking around, like, you've got to hope to be swimming in the same waters that a program like Boise State is, because frankly, you're far too invested in athletics to aspire for anything less than that. And you have so much to offer as a school, as a college town, institutionally, the facilities, it's all there. There's really no reason that CSU can't be one of those teams that, at least as far as G5 standards goes, is, kind of like in the top of their class, that could be, viewed as one of the teams that should be in the mix for the college football playoff each year. But obviously they've just never been able to live up to it. At least in the post-Lubick era, you had the flash in the pan under McElwain, and unfortunately he didn't stick around long enough to really see it come to fruition. And what could have been, we could do woulda, coulda, shoulda until the cows come home. But the fact of the matter is, with the way that the landscape of college football is evolving, with realignment and all these moves that are happening, and I'm sure there'll be some more major shakeups here in the next 5-6 years, it's now or never for this program. Either you rise to the occasion, you take advantage of all that you have to offer, and you break through that glass ceiling that you haven't been able to as a program, or you're going to have some checks that are going to be tough to cash, and you're going to very likely be in a position that's really tough for CSU, and you have to make some really, really rough calls. And obviously the hope with the move to the Pac-12 and everything is to remain relevant, is for that to be the 5th best football league. I think all of that is within the realm of possibility. But first things first, before you start worrying about things on that level, this program has just got to accomplish what it's capable of. And it's been a long time since we've seen that happen. Maybe 2024 will be the year. We're going to keep talking about all this. We are going to get into those questions I have for the Rams going into this season. After that, I will get into the latest recruiting news. We'll talk about Tahj Bullock, the former Akron and Virginia Tech dual threat quarterback that has come over. Talk about Jaden Cortell, legacy commit, which I love to see. Son of legendary Rams cornerback Ron Cortell. He commits from San Diego Mesa College as well. We'll give some final thoughts at the end. If you've got any questions, comments, throw them my way in the Toyota chat. If I don't get to it immediately, we will star it and come back around. If you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up, I certainly would appreciate it. But real quick, we need to take a breather. We got to pay the bills and shout out a couple of our awesome partners. All right, first things first, I want to talk to you guys about Mando. Mando's a men's deodorant brand that's hyper-focused on keeping every aspect of a man's body smelling fresh and clean. They mean it, too. Every aspect. Your belly button, your balls, your butt crack, your grundle, you can put Mando anywhere. What's awesome is they've got a variety of great scents that are geared towards men. Cloverwoods, Mount Fuji, Pro Sport. What's really cool about Mando is it's a product that you can trust. It was created by a doctor who saw firsthand the way that BO is being misdiagnosed and mistreated. And it's clinically proven to control odor better than a shower with soap alone. You know, we got the summer coming up. It's the stinky season, fellas. You want to make sure that you're covering yourself. I'll be honest, traveling these last couple weeks, being in airports and the amount of people that very clearly could use some Mando. I hope they take advantage of this deal. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, plus free shipping. As a special offer for our listeners, new customers can get a $5 off with their starter pack with an exclusive code. That's going to equate to over 40% off your starter pack. Use the code DNVR at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Please support our show. Tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. I also need to shout out Empire Today real quick. I'm sure you know the jingle if you're from around these parts, and frankly, they're such a big part of the local community because of the quality product that they have to offer. With Empire Today, it's the best place to get new flooring. They've got a ton of copycats out there. They can't touch Empire, not on their quality, not on their service, not on their speed. Their philosophy, it's not to overwhelm you with thousands of choices and substitutes. Honestly, what they omit from their selection, it's just as important as what they include. With their virtual floor designer, it's a great way to see how any flooring will look with any space. Just snap a picture, boom. See how my bedroom's going to look with this. Maybe you want to put hardwood in the living room. Want to see what it would look like, though, with your color scheme. Snap a picture, easy as that. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can get a $350 discount when they use the promo code DNVR. Restrictions do apply. See empiretoday.com/DNVR for details. All right. We will get into the latest recruiting news. We'll talk about some potential wrinkles in the offense that Tahj Bullock could provide. That name sounds familiar. He was a top 20 dual threat QB coming out in 2019, been in college for a while now. We'll talk about what he could potentially bring to the offense. I'll say it now and I'll say it again when we get into it, just so there's no confusion here. This doesn't change anything in terms of who will be the starting quarterback this fall. Outside of injuries, I guess, which, knock on wood, you never know what could happen in that regard. There are no debates about who will be the starting quarterback. That was very evident throughout the spring. Going into camp, it is very firmly Braden Fowler-Nicolosi's job. Adding another veteran quarterback doesn't change that. I do think, though, that it could allow you to get creative and maybe take advantage of his athleticism in certain situations. Again, we'll talk about that here in just a second. The biggest question, and I don't know if we're really going to know until week 1, because, even looking back at last year, you might see some things early on in fall camp, and then all of a sudden they make a scheme change, and the offense going into the Texas game looks nothing like what we saw in early August. But what will the balance of the offense be in terms of run versus pass? You were a very pass-heavy offense in 2023. 2024 went into more of a West Coast-based scheme, really leaned on the ground game. They tried to, instead of being an aggressive, vertical passing offense, it was more about trying to maintain possession, trying to limit the possessions that other teams got, in some ways kind of shielding the defense. Jay has been pretty open that he felt like they kind of had to do that and able to hold up defensively. Obviously, a lot has changed since then. Freddie Banks no longer the defensive coordinator. You bring over Tyson Summers from Western Kentucky. Could not be more different than Freddie in terms of his approach and just the aggressiveness with which he's going to call the game. But offensively, I think it'll be really interesting because you do have a third-year quarterback who has a ton of reps at this point. He's a guy who has shown the ability to do some pretty remarkable things in terms of the vertical passing game. He's got a great arm. He's got great touch up the sideline. He can make throws that a lot of guys can't. He's going to need to be far more consistent than he's been, throughout his career. I've pointed out a million times that I think the revolving door that's been the wide receiver room has not helped in terms of just establishing some chemistry and rapport within the offense. I think there are some factors there that have worked against him. I think changing the scheme, putting him under center, which is something he had never done throughout his career, like there's an adjustment period with that. And I think if Torrey had stayed healthy, I think we probably would have saw Braden put up bigger passing numbers than he did this past season. But they have such a loaded backfield, as CD Sticks says, here in the Toyota chat. I would argue it's probably the deepest room on the team at the moment. I mean, if everybody is healthy, you feel really good about the options you have going into this year. I think Marshall and Dupree, that's as good of a 1-2 punch as there will be in the league. But I mean, they bring over the kid from Tulsa, Lloyd Avant. He looks the part. Keegan Hollis is a guy that, when healthy, like they trust him. He's a good athlete, really fast if they can get him the ball in open space. You bring Van Shield back, who I think probably ends up being a special teams guy, maybe some short yardage carries. Maybe, I guess, if depending on how Marshall's holding up, I could see them using him in some key pass blocking scenarios. But that running back room is stacked. And I think it would be foolish to just all of a sudden start throwing the ball 60 times. I just would like to see them be more aggressive with the passing game. And yeah, you want to lean on that ground game when you can, but can you build off of it as well? And I felt like there was a couple week stretch there, like around Oregon State-ish, where they were starting to implement some of those bootlegs and like they were allowing, BFN to get out in space. I felt like they had some success there. Then Torrey got hurt and they just kind of went away from it. Now, maybe that had to do with personnel. There are a lot of factors that could play into that. But I think that's going to be key this year. And like, what does that balance look like? Obviously, it'll be interesting to see who's actually calling the plays. I still don't think we definitively know. I stand by my reporting that I've had for months now that I expect Matt Mumme to be the offensive play caller. We'll see. I don't know. It's been a very odd deal with how all of that's been handled. Who will be the leading receiver? You came into this season really excited because you had Lewis Brown coming back, a guy who you initially signed out of high school, you developed, he started to break out, and then obviously we know how that all played out. He decided to enter the portal. I've heard he was promised all kinds of big things. That was a whole dramatic storyline, but Justice Russ Simmons, LB, they were definitely tampered with. Like, I don't think it's worth getting in our feelings over. That is what college football is today, but they were tampered. Justice Ross Simmons ended where we expected him to end up at, which is Syracuse. LB, I think, was promised some pretty big things. Ultimately landed at San Diego State. Had a productive season, but, really didn't do what he hoped to. So he came back to CSU, and had he just been able to stay out of trouble, I think he could have been an all-conference wide receiver. I think he could have been an NFL guy, and maybe he still can be somewhere else. I guess we shall see. but you don't have a ton of size out wide. I think it's probably going to open up an opportunity for a guy like Tay Lanier to have a much bigger role in the offense. And to Tay's credit, he's really looked good. He looks the part physically. I think he's a guy that's going to be a nice little portal addition for CSU. But is Jordan Ross your true number one wide receiver? He looks good in practice. He looked good as the season progressed. We saw them kind of use him more and more as the season progressed. And part of it was out of necessity, but I think part of it was also just out of the schedule of his development. Like he stepped up and he made some plays for the offense over the last couple of weeks of the 2024 season. And everything that I've seen from him since leads me to believe that he's the real deal. He's not the biggest guy in the world, though. And so I am interested to see how he deals with like some press coverage against some bigger DBs. He's a good athlete, runs really well, sharp route runner, great hands. But there's some size limitations there in terms of how you're going to be able to use him. Tommy Maher's another guy who looks really good. It's not just a feel-good story. They added him as a PWO with the belief that he could be something, and he proved that in year one, working his way onto the field. I don't think I've seen him drop a ball yet. And I wasn't there every day because of the Avalanche stuff, but from what I've seen from Tommy Maher, he looks really good. Mitch wants to know how has Kojo looked thus far, Ohio State transfer. He has a torn Achilles, so we have not seen him yet on the field. Him and Armani Winfield were both dinged up throughout the spring. Dylan Goffney ultimately enters the portal, which is not surprising there. That I think that's probably a mutual situation. But yeah, like who can be the number one guy? I don't know if we know quite yet. I think if I had to bet on somebody, it'd be Jordan Ross as of now. I think Maher is going to have a big option, but they're going to need at least one of Antwi and Winfield to work out. I think I like the receiving core. I just wonder if they have a true number one outside guy right now. I think they've got a lot of good receivers. I don't know if they have a great receiver, but I would love for Jordan Ross to be that. And I think he's got the capability. Like I think he's a stud. I just wish he was a little bit bigger. I think it would help his margins. But I mean, especially in the Mountain West, that's not the biggest deal in the world. And everything I've heard from a work ethic standpoint, everything I've seen from how he carries himself in practice, that guy is going to be a playmaker. Him and Tommy will be great. But I just don't know if you have like a Torrey Horton or, a Michael Gallup, a receiver like that has the ability to just kind of take the conference by storm. And maybe that is like a Kojo Antwi if he's able to get healthy for the fall. But we'll kind of have to see how that all plays out. Kind of sticking with the passing game, how big of an impact can Jackson Warren make for you? Hopes are really high for him. And I will say, although he wasn't fully cleared throughout the spring, from what we were able to see from him, he looks the part. Big athletic dude. He runs well. He's a converted quarterback, so he's got a really strong understanding of what the offense is trying to accomplish schematically. The chemistry, the rapport is there. He and BFN are roommates. They get along really well. The encouraging thing is Rocky Beers has exceeded expectations. He could be a true number one tight end for you. So if Jackson Warren lives up to what we think he's capable of being, the two tight end sets that you can run with those two guys, and some of the ways you're going to be able to attack teams up the seam, like I love the thought of that. And I think that gives you some flexibility, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier with creating and play action, just because you've got more guys that are able to block out there. I really like how that tight end room looks. And even what was his name? Carlos Anaya, I believe, came over from Wofford, might have been smaller program. He looks the part too. Like they've got three really big athletic dudes. They haven't really had that Cole Turner type at CSU since Norvell has been there. They added Dallin Holker, who ended up being a stud, obviously, but he wasn't 6'7" out there, and you weren't going to throw a jump ball to him. And I just think that these guys and some of the things they're going to be able to do offensively with these big-bodied tight ends is really exciting. But obviously that starts kind of with Jackson Warren and how healthy he is and, what he's able to contribute. We've got some great questions here in the Toyota chat that we will come back around to. We are going to take one quick break real quick, shout out a couple of our other partners, and we'll keep this conversation rolling. All right, let's shout out the official vehicle of DNVR. That, of course, is Toyota. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, they built durable legends, destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Toyota offers 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give your customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck, not to be outdone though. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. If you're cruising around in your Toyota Tacoma, maybe you're taking in the scenery, maybe you're listening to a little bit of baseball on the radio. I'm a sucker for that. I'm a romantic when it comes to baseball on the radio. Maybe you pop in a Lucy nicotine patch and or not a patch, pouches, I guess would be the more accurate way to put it. Brain went dead there for a second. Could use a Lucy right now. 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco free. Lucy breakers are pouches that have a little bit of extra flavor and hydration. Sometimes they can get a little gross in your mouth, not with the breakers though. It's a great way to just keep the texture consistent. Level up your nicotine routine by going to lucy.co/DNVR. I'm a 4 milligram kind of guy. I love mango, cinnamon, mint. You can't really go wrong. Lucy has a 30-day refund policy if you change your mind. Again, use that code DNVR to get 20% off your first order at lucy.co. Use the code DNVR. Here comes the fine print. Lucy products are only for adults of legal age. Every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. CD Sticks wants to know, how are the backs as receivers? I think Dupree is somebody that can be impactful for you there coming out of the backfield. Traditionally, it hasn't been Marshall's greatest strength, although I do think he's somebody that can, in the screen game, I think if you can get him in space, he could be impactful in terms of being like an outlet out of the back. To me, that's more Dupree territory than Marshall. I haven't really seen it out of Avant yet, and that's not to say that he can't. And in fact, the stats that he had at the high school level would suggest he's actually pretty capable in that area. So I'll see if kind of the eye test matches the number, come fall. He's somebody that I'm very curious to follow. It wouldn't surprise me if he actually assumed a larger role offensively than we're anticipating. I just think being able to shake it up and lean on multiple guys is going to be an advantage for all these backs, because I think Marshall, and we've seen this now over a decent sample size, he's at his best in that like 10 to 15 carries per game. Anything more than that kind of has some troubles holding up. He's not the biggest dude. He's explosive. He's fast. When you can get him a seam, man, he can take off. But I just think being able to lean on these guys and not have to, have one back be a 20 plus touch per night type deal is going to be beneficial for the whole group. But yeah, I would say, to answer your question there, Dupree is probably the guy to keep an eye on in terms of receiving production out of the backfield. Josh wants to know, does Higgins make a leap over the summer/fall? 6'4" wide receiver transfer from San Jose State. Yeah, made some plays in the scrimmage. Keenan Higgins is who Josh is referencing. Was injured most of last year, so he's been in the program, which you like, just in terms of familiarity with the playbook and all of that. And again, like, he's another guy that, because of what happened with Lewis Brown, is probably going to be presented with more of an opportunity to make plays. I think of all the guys who that benefits, Keenan Higgins and Taylor Lanier would probably be the biggest guys I would point to. Stephon Daly maybe as well. So another guy that kind of made some plays as the season progressed. He's got to be more consistent with his approach, and like what he shows in practice is something that I've heard fairly consistently from the staff going back to the beginning of last season. So we'll see. But Higgins and Lanier did have really good springs, and I'm hearing great things about them. So I think both those guys could be in position to have bigger seasons than maybe you would expect coming in. How does the offensive line hold up? The last couple of years you've been pretty dependent on transfers to, plug and play, fill some gaps for you. You still could have a transfer or two that end up in the starting lineup by the time fall rolls around. But if the line is going to be what I most consistently saw in fall, which Christian Martin at left tackle, Tanner Morley at left guard, Trevin Heel at center, Ader Urian Baranchea at right guard, and then Aaron Karras at right tackle. I will say I like that CSU is in a spot now where the development is paying off. They're signing guys that are working out, that are getting onto the field oftentimes like in their second year in the program. That's a really good thing for CSU. It is really tough year after year to field a competent starting five in the trenches if you are constantly having to sign 3-4 guys out of the portal. Like, you need to fill 1 or 2 spots. All right, that's manageable. When it starts turning into 3+, it just puts you in a really tough spot in terms of having to basically be perfect on who you're hitting on. And that's just not how recruiting is going to work. It's a lot like the NFL draft. You're just hoping that you can hit more than you miss. I will say, like, based on what we saw in spring, seemed fairly encouraging, but I'll always take those results with a grain of salt. If the offensive line is just getting worked in the spring, then I'd be concerned. And that was the case in 2022. That was definitely an indication of what was to come. There wasn't really anything either way that made me have red alarms going off or anything like that. I do have some questions about the defensive line depth. And that's kind of my next question is, do the Rams have enough beef up front? I will say of all of the departures, like losing Gatkuth and Kershke was tough. I just think those would be day one starters for you. And then if you then added, Jaquez Evans and the transfer that they brought over, Paul Tangelo from St. Francis, like I think you would feel really good about the chaos that front seven could create in terms of pass rushing. I wonder if they have enough beef to hold up against the run. And I wonder if the depth, particularly in the interior, is going to be there. They've got some guys that I like a lot. I think Lorich is somebody that's in for a pretty big year. I think we're going to see, Jack Moran, get on the field. Like, there are some guys I like. Kenyon Aggers really flashed a lot this past season. Mukendi Wakalanji, somebody who's been in the program for a long time. I could see him elevating and having a productive season. I just feel like they could use another guy or two, particularly in the D-line. I feel pretty good about the linebacking situation. I know losing Boom Jock and Chase Wilson was a tough pill to swallow, but I think Owen Long is a star on the rise. And I think Jacob Ellis can be just fine. I think he can make up for anything that was lost, with the departure of somebody like Chase Wilson. So I'm really not worried about the backers at all, but I am worried about the beef with the defensive line and just if they're going to have enough guys to hold up. I think early in the games, I think their starters be just fine. Is the depth there? That's a question for me going into the season. How much do you feel the loss of those transfers? I said I feel pretty good about the backers, but when you lose 4 guys who are projected to start in your front 7 on top of basically having to lose or having to replace the entire secondary, that's a lot of moving pieces that you're asking to come together quickly. And I just wonder, especially like early on in the season, if you feel that lack of continuity, if you feel some confusion, if you see some issues with communication and just guys not being super comfortable yet, because it's a new scheme, it's a new system, it's a lot of new people. In some ways, I think that's kind of a benefit that it's new people, because you don't have people that are trying to, do what they've did in previous years. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking that. I just feel like it would be easier to teach a group of new guys a new system than trying to get 11 guys that had been well-versed in one system to completely change all their habits. At least that's my opinion going in. But how much do you feel the loss of those guys, and how quickly can those transfers that you bring in, Lamondre Joe at cornerback, Jacob Ellis at backer, Jaquez Evans and all these guys, how quickly can they hit the ground running? And how does the change in defensive mentality ultimately play out? I said earlier that it's going to be night and day in terms of what we saw in previous years under Freddie Banks. He was just kind of often, like, it felt like just basically dropping into like a prevent zone and just trying to prevent the big play. It was not the aggressive man coverage, we're going to send pressure type mentality that Norvell boasted about coming in. It was not that at all. Maybe that had to do with personnel. Maybe they simply were not equipped to play that style. But that is how they're going to call things under Tyson Summers. That's how he has always called things. It can produce a mixed bag, though. And that makes sense, right? When you send guys, you're either going to make a play or you're going to be susceptible to giving up the big play. And when I think back to the Tyson Summers defense in 2015, which had a lot of veterans, and Trent Matthews, KPL, Kevin Davis, some of the guys they had back in the day, they made a lot of plays. They created a lot of turnovers. They also gave up a lot of 50-plus yard touchdowns. And I wonder if it's a season like that, a game where you get burned and you give up, 2-3 big plays, but also you create 2 defensive touchdowns and you can kind of live with it. But we're going to see a much different mentality, and it'll be interesting to see what type of success this unit ultimately has. And, if they're able to capitalize and if they're able to create chaos in the backfield and get hits on the quarterback and create tackles for loss and create turnovers, that's going to be great. If you don't make the plays, though, obviously that puts you in a pretty rough spot. Will special teams be a strength or a weakness? It's been a strength the last couple of years, which has been nice to see after CSU basically invented ways late in the Bobo tenure and throughout the Adazio era to blow games almost exclusively on special teams. It was a sight to behold. I'll never forget that Boise State game where Avery Williams had like 3 different returns and maybe a blocked kick or something against CSU. It was just stupid. The Utah State debacle was a disaster, but you're replacing both of your specialists. You lose Jordan Noyes plus Patty Turner. On top of that, Torrey Horton was your top return guy. Some other guys, Kobe Johnson, Caleb Goody, that were also involved in the return game, they're not in the mix anymore. Who steps up for you? And is it a strength or a weakness? And if CSU is going to be a contender, if they're going to be the type of team that is in the mix come November, it better be a strength, because your margins, I would assume, are not going to be significant enough to be able to survive it if it is not a strength for you. Last couple of questions I have here, and these are a little bit more generic. We're through the main ones. Again, if you've got questions, throw them my way in the Toyota chat. I will gladly respond to as many as I can. Who has a breakout season for you? To me, and I'm not really thinking of guys who we've seen produce at this point. Like, I feel pretty confident in saying that Jalen Dupree, if healthy, is going to have a great year. I feel pretty confident in saying, Owen Long, as long as all goes to plan, is going to be, at worst, like a second team all conference linebacker for you. I think he's going to be great. Can somebody like Jet Vincent, who we haven't seen as much, AJ Noland, can they step up? One of the transfers even, like, who can break out for you in a significant way and be somebody you depend on that we haven't, seen the Rams be able to lean on in the past? If you're able to get 2 or 3 of these guys, I really like CSU's chances of having a pretty good season. If it's more like 1, I think that could be potentially a bad sign. It's not guaranteed, but you're going to need some of these transfers and first-year starters to contribute in a pretty significant way and to make a lot of plays and make up for a lot of the production that was lost from this past year's team. And then finally, just kind of some position battle questions I have. Who ultimately is the backup quarterback? I would say Darius Curry had a better spring than Brousseau did, just from what I saw. And take all takes from spring with a grain of salt. I would still put Brousseau as the front runner to be the number 2 going into next year. His younger brother recently committed to Oklahoma State, was a Utah State transfer. I had my eye on him if he might end up in Fort Collins. So that'll be interesting to see, especially now that you bring in Tahj Bullock, the Akron transfer, another veteran. Could he potentially be your backup quarterback? Like, would he be the guy you went to if there was a scenario in which Braden got hurt, or you pulled him because you're up big or down or whatever. Is Justin Marshall still the number one running back by the end of the non-conference slate? I assume he'll be the starter week 1, and that's an assumption. Really, I think it'll be a pretty close to a 50-50 mix early on with him and Dupree. I'm just really high on Jalen Dupree, if you haven't got that by now. I think Marshall is great. I'm really glad that he stuck around, and I think being able to lean on both those guys, it's going to benefit both of them. But I think Dupree has a chance to be like the next star in this offense and to put up some pretty insane numbers. So I'm really excited about him. Who starts in the secondary? Jahari Rogers was kind of dinged up, but I've heard good things about him going into the summer. So like, how does somebody like him pan out? Lamondre Joe had a good spring. CJ Blocker, who came over from Utah, he had a good spring. But there's just basically every role in the secondary is up for grabs. Like, you assume Aiden Hector will fill some type of role, although I like him better near the line of scrimmage than I do like roaming the secondary. Do you go young and it's Noland and Vincent out there? Maybe somebody like Cortell, who recently came over from San Diego Mesa, could be in the mix for you. I guess let's just segue it in. That worked pretty naturally. And talk about the latest CSU football transfer portal additions. They've had a couple in the last 4 or 5 days or so. Let's start, I guess, since we were just talking about it, with Jaden Cortell. Comes over from San Diego Mesa, 5'11", 165-pound defensive back. Spent the last 2 seasons there at the JUCO level. 54 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, and a fumble recovery in 2024. Played corner in 2023. They moved him back to free safety this past year. Played at Chula Vista High School before that, which is a good program. You like that he offers potentially a little bit of positional versatility given the amount of moving pieces you have in that secondary. If he's a guy that could line up in the slot for you and be a slot corner, but also, drop back and play free safety if necessary, that would be awesome. He runs really well. That's what stands out the most to him, the most about him when you watch him on Huddle. There are 2 or 3 plays where it's him, getting a fumble recovery or an interception and housing it the other way. And it looks like, like Dominique Rogers-Cromartie back in the day, when he would house it, he would take off and he's just gone. You don't have an opportunity to catch up with him. In fact, he runs well enough that I wonder if there could be some kick return possibilities for him. I mean, he's a blur out there. He's physical. He's not the biggest guy in the world, 5'11", 165-pound frame. To me, that's more of a slot corner frame at the D1 level than a free safety. But I like the way he plays, man. He's got good closing speed. He's a sure tackler in the open field, which is, as somebody that grew up idolizing Champ Bailey, there's nothing that frustrates me more than these corners that won't wrap up. They come in and they try and pop you in the chest. Then they don't make the play and they're shocked afterwards. Like, wrap a guy up, go low, bring him down. And what I like about Cortell is he's got good closing speed. He takes good angles, and then he wraps you up. He brings you to the ground. He's got good instincts in the open field. You see him reading and reacting out there, and he's able to go out and make plays. He trusts those instincts as well as a corner. As a safety, there are times you're going to have to make judgment calls. There's a couple of instances on his Huddle where he just reads and reacts, and he goes and makes a play. He's disruptive in pass coverage. Again, he's physical, a guy who, if he's got a chance to lay the wood in the open field, he's going to. If he has a chance to, get his hands on you, he's going to. I like his game a lot, and I like that they were able to bring in the son of a CSU legend, Ron Cortell, great corner. Back in the day, still top 10 with 13 career interceptions. I believe that's tied for 6th all time. I think Cortell could be an intriguing addition. They've done a good job of really going out and finding good athletes. I think they're going to be a lot more athletic, and they're going to run a lot better in the secondary than they have in recent years. They had some guys that were solid and produced well for you. Chiggy and Dom Jones were good corners in this program. But I think that the athleticism is going to make a difference with the type of guys that they're bringing in. And I would say Cortell, although he doesn't have the recruiting flash of some of the other additions, it wouldn't surprise me if he could be a guy that is maybe able to contribute for you a little bit. Not the biggest dude, would like to see him put some weight on, but I like his mentality. I like his ball skills. I like his instincts. And I like the way he plays the game. So he'll be somebody that I keep an eye on. And we always just love a legacy Ram. Tahj Bullock was the interesting offseason addition. I don't think I anticipated them bringing in a quarterback just kind of based on everything I had heard. He's a guy who started at Virginia Tech, then went to Akron for the past 2 years. He's played 4 years of college football, but I believe because of COVID and because he redshirted as a freshman, still has 2 years to play. I'll have to verify that. Has at least one. I believe he has 2, though. Played in 22 games the past 2 years, rushed for 12 touchdowns with Akron, threw 3 touchdowns, threw 3 interceptions, also caught 10 passes in 2024, so kind of a gadget guy in the offense. 6'3", 220 pounds. You love the frame. You love how well he runs. He was a top 20 dual threat quarterback coming out in 2019. I was considered one of the top quarterbacks coming out of New Jersey, won a state title in New Jersey as a junior, threw for 2,300 yards, 26 touchdowns. Got his senior season, unfortunately, impacted by COVID, so I think he only played in 4 games. But you like that production as a junior, and you see why he ultimately landed at Virginia Tech. I said it earlier, but just want to make sure it's clear. I don't think he's somebody that comes in and pushes Braden for the starting job or anything like that. You don't have any questions about who is going to be the starter for the Rams this season, but can you take advantage of his athleticism and find ways to implement him into the offense and create some new interesting wrinkles? I think somebody with his size and the way he runs, in red zone scenarios and 3rd and 4th and short scenarios, maybe you just line up and go QB power, let him take it himself. I think there's some interesting things you can do in terms of like implementing some option type offense. Like when you've got a guy that can run this way, take advantage of it. And we've seen coaches in recent years be more willing to be creative. And sure, they probably know that he's going to run the ball when he's on the field, but can you stop it? Can you line up and stop it? And if you can have success with that, it can just be such a huge boost to the offense. Then obviously, like, you can design things to where you set up to surprise them. Then all of a sudden you let them drop back and throw one of these times. Like, I think it allows you to do some fun things, and he could be potentially a Taysom Hill Joker type, player for the offense. And I think he could be, I think back to like BVP on the Broncos late in the Kubiak era, and they would just bring him in, and you want to know what? We're going QB draw. Can you stop it? Obviously, that was like the entire offense with Tebow. We're either going halfback dive to Willis McGahee, or we're going QB draw, we're going QB power. Can you stop any of those plays? Oftentimes the defenses couldn't. But I love that you can do some of that now and not run the risk of having your starter potentially get dinged up, which is obviously always a risk. I do want to see them lean on Braden's legs a little bit too, because I think he's a guy that runs better than people give him credit for. He's got long strides. And he showed some good instincts there. So like, again, like I want to see him do a little bit of that as well. But also I don't think he's a guy who you're going to line up and go QB power in the red zone. Tahj Bullock could be somebody that you do that with. And I'm interested to see how big of a role he ultimately has in the offense, if one at all. Maybe they bring him in and it just doesn't really work out. It would shock me if we don't see any instances where they try and lean on that athleticism, especially given that he is a guy who's rushed for 12 touchdowns these last couple of years. I mean, if he's rushing for a touchdown, he had 6 rushing touchdowns this year, 1 every other game, that'd be a huge success. That's just another weapon to use in the offense. And the fact that he's really experienced, has played 4 years of college football. You add another veteran to that room, so if he's been there, who gets it. I like that element as well. Jaden Cortell, P.D. Tucker, Georgia State wide receiver, who we talked about last show, and the edge rusher Paul Tangelo should all be here this summer, as should the interior offensive line Tristan Holmbrecht, who's coming over from Dartmouth. He's potentially a wild card to start for CSU. I'd say we'll have to see when he ultimately gets to campus, but 3-year starter, I believe, in the Ivy League, very much recognized as one of the top offensive linemen in that league. So maybe he's able to make the jump as he comes up. Before we get out of here, again, if you got any questions, comments, throw them my way in the Toyota chat. That's where we're at, though, in terms of where the roster is heading into the season, I think they did a good job of addressing positions of need. Once LB got suspended, I said it a million times that I would add another receiver with some size. They did that in P.D. Tucker. Felt like they needed another edge rusher. That was probably their biggest need in getting Paul Tangelo, and it sounds like there were some pretty big schools that were interested in him. I think that's a big win for CSU. I love the way he's going to translate in this aggressive defense, and he's got long arms. Kind of gives me some Shaq Barrett type vibes. What do we have here? CD6 says, I have a rational confidence in Maher being a third down chain mover getting open underneath. I don't think that's rational, my friend. Based on what we've seen from him, the dude's always open. And I talked about this a little bit on the Ram Nation podcast when they had me on a couple weeks back, maybe close to a month ago. They had me, and then they also brought on BFN. And that was one of the things I mentioned, was that Tommy just is always open, and I have yet to see him drop a ball. And I think he's for real. Like, I think he can be a more productive Joe Hansley slot receiver for you. I think he's a guy that's going to be really important this year. I do, especially given that you don't have a Torrey Horton or a Michael Gallup who you're just going to throw the ball up and go get it. I think that might be the tight ends. And I think the receivers, third and shorts, maybe run a little whip route with, somebody like Maher or Jordan Ross. Like, I think those guys are going to be technical, and I think they're really going to eat in those scenarios. The question for me is, if it's 3rd and 7 and you're in the red zone and you need a touchdown, can you throw it up and have a guy like Jordan Ross? Can he create separation to get it in the tight spaces of the field? Between the 20s, those guys are going to be incredible. In the red zone, though, what does that passing offense look like? And I think in particular, that's where somebody like Rocky Beers and Jackson Warren could be really important. And then, we talked about Higgins and Tay Lanier and some of these other guys that have had nice springs. It's going to be interesting to see like how all of this pans out. If you missed it, Torrey Horton is going to wear number 15 with the Seahawks. I love that. Great receiver number. It's so funny to me. Like, I was like going through my head. I was like, what are the good receiver numbers? Not crazy about 1 through 3. I don't know why. For whatever reason, I just don't love it. 4, and I think it's honestly just because I'm biased from David Anderson and Gallup and all those guys. 4 is a good receiver number. 5, fine. Really, like 4 through 7, all solid. 8, 9, meh. 10, 11, 12, 13, meh. Once you start getting to that like 14 through 17 range, solid again. There's no logic behind any of this. It's all based on vibes. But I do love 15, and I think it's going to look sharp. Seattle's got cool uniforms too, so like he's going to look so slick, running around and in those unis. I think I'm gonna have to get one. I went back and forth because I still hold Super Bowl 48 against Seattle as a Broncos fan, but I think it's a good landing spot for him. And I've got some questions about their quarterback situation. Obviously, going into the year, like, is it going to be Sam Howell? I think they brought Drew Lock back. Like, it's going to be. We'll see how that all works out. But 15, good vibes. Michael Gallup to wear 12 with Washington. Don't like that as much. Don't like it. MG13 sounded cool. Like, it's a sweet nickname. 14 even would have been like his CSU number plus 10. 12, where does that come from? Don't love the vibes on that from a receiver number standpoint. If you can't tell, I'm killing time here before we get out. I've got about a minute left. I need off-season recommendations, guys. If you got anything that I should check out, TV shows, books, movies, please send them my way. I'm desperate. I just finished Yellowstone. I finished The Righteous Gemstones, which was awesome. I don't want to give any spoilers away. It looked like it was going to end super dark for a second, but I love that show. I love Danny McBride. Watched Field of Dreams the other day. Is Field of Dreams a sports movie? That's a question I was asking myself after watching it. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I know it's kind of a snoozer. I know people are very mixed in terms of their opinions on Field of Dreams. It's one of those, like, baseball is an element of the movie, but it's really like a family story and a tale about a dad trying to, or a son trying to, reconcile his regrets about his relationship with his dad more than anything. But shoot, I'm down for 2+ hours of Costner doing anything like that. That dude I would literally watch anything with Kevin Costner. Yeah, I guess that's a very random way to end the show. But shout out to everybody for continuing to support the work. I know we've been all over the place in terms of our schedule. We're going to be talking Neat Clifford and his pre-draft process here coming up. I think he's got a chance to be a lottery pick. I really do. We're going to get some guests on. We'll have Kevin back on the pod. It's been a while since we've had him on. If you have somebody you'd like me to reach out to and try to get on the pod, I'm always down for recommendations as well. Much love, y'all. Stay dry out there. Rainy, cold couple of days. Always proud to be y'all. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.